Dr. Roger Rassool. He's a physicist from the University of Melbourne and a co-founder and CEO of FREO2, which is a nonprofit which seeks to make oxygen available in low-resource communities. He is an inventor, extremely passionate about industry engagement. He has established 2 startup companies, and he has a strong commitment to equitable access to health and education, and working in many remote communities and schools, driving education programs. So without further ado, here's Dr. Rassool.
Wow. Well, thank you, Cole, and thank you to the team for inviting me. And I'll just ask Maya if she can swap the spotlight. Actually, Cole, if you drop out your screen share, that'll fix it. Yeah. You're currently, there we go. So hi, everybody, and a big thank you to the organisers for inviting me to speak. I'm actually connecting in from Australia, down under, the wonders of the internet. And I'm not used to delivering where I can't see everybody. And so what I'm going to do is I'm going to break my presentation into 2 chunks. The first chunk to bore you and present to you some amazing and uninteresting facts, and then an opportunity for you to actually ask questions and actually engage in the talk. So I'm hoping to meet everybody from, well, we've got Team TF, the bison, spare ribs, and was it broccoli and carp diem? Like, so looking forward to hearing about you and what your ideas are. All right, so anyway, hackathons are about taking risks and doing something that you've never done before. And I'm about to do something that I've never done before. I'm not actually going to share my slides through the traditional Zoom share. I've actually set up a slightly different system which will allow me to do this. And if it stops working, you know, Sophia or May are going to come to the rescue and cover for me. Is that all right, Sophia? Yeah, okay, cool. All right, and as Cole said, RespiraCon 2 met last week, and now this is a hackathon. Let's actually focus on this, but I thought, why not actually start with 2 of my heroes? So, oh my gosh, they look so old, just like me. And I think the average age, if we ran a poll on the average age, I think you're going to be well below 30, and I need to talk hexadecimally to be well below my 40s or thereabouts. So, but I want to remind you, and if we're in a room, I'd ask, you know, quiz, who's on the left, who's on the right. I've had the great opportunity of visiting the birthplace and the homes of both of these, my friend Albert. This is what they look like when they made their brilliant discoveries. Albert was only 23. You know, I'd been working at a patent office. 1905 is when he finally published those 3 amazing papers, the work done around 1902. Marie Curie was under 30 when she did the pivotal work and seminal work she did. And by the way, there weren't color photographs around that time. Do you get me? So you Google on the web, you'll find color versions of them. Here is what you'll also find, great quotes from these people. And I want to come back, actually, that RespiraCon, from concept to impact. Dr. Reed, it's just so easy. Have a concept and it'll have amazing impact. I'm going to ask you to remember something. Now, I don't know whether you can actually do it. Maybe these don't exist, but I'm going to get you all to promise me you will get a pen and a notebook for this hackathon. I don't want to hear, oh, I'm using Slack and I'm recording everything on Slack. When you get a bright idea, I'm going to ask you to write it down, and that way you'll be able to carry it. This is an idea book from the time we were in Uganda at one point, and you can see it's protected. You know, there's got the anti-write device, a bit of tape around it, and the ideas are all in there. Then they've been transcribed. And she was all about ideas and curiosity. Okay, so they're the words. So remember those words, ideas, curiosity. Don't have no fear of perfection, because you're never going to get there. So when you're hacking an idea, it's a safe space. You're never going to actually get to perfection, certainly not in 48 hours. But you want to get that idea from an idea. So I'm just, my camera's inverted because I'm using OBS, so I have to ignore my left-right signal in my monitor. And you want to get from an idea somehow to impact. And there are steps in between. The idea has to be innovated, The innovation has to be implemented, and that implementation then leads to impact. So there are many steps in there. Think of the 4 I's. If you're writing down something, I'd write down the 4 I's. Einstein, great quote, imagination is more important than knowledge. Einstein's full of other quotes, yeah, but remember that one. It's not about the knowledge you have, it's about the imagination and your curiosity and how you might actually tackle some of these amazing problems. So I had such a joy reading some of the problems. Dr. Reed sent me a question this morning. I said, well, actually, I was quite intrigued by the paramagnetic separation of oxygen from air. And I can tell you later on about how zeolites work. And I failed chemistry, so don't tell anybody. But the chemical process is underpinned by the quadrupole moment of oxygen and using that for separation. So some knowledge is important, but you have to imagine how you might use it. And so the goal is, I can sort of see this has been clipped off a little bit at the top, but the goal is somehow to actually get to this impact. Concept to impact. So a long time ago, and I can see this is actually clipping on your screen. So actually, if I go to here, does it, let me just see, I'm still learning. There we go, a long time ago. I've got the clipping slightly wrong on that screen. Here's what I want it to be. Oops, sorry. Here's what I want it to be. I want to be an astronaut. And it's just down the road from you guys at Rice University. I so enjoyed visiting your campus 2 years ago and going to NASA, because that's what I wanted to be when I was a kid. Unfortunately, it didn't happen. I didn't end up an astronaut. Andy Thomas is the only Australian who's ever been an astronaut, and it never happened for me. But I got to work at this amazing place called CERN on the Large Hadron Collider. I got to work at Stanford. I got to work all over the world. And I got to travel, and I want to show you these 2 young people at the time because they are your age. And these are my co-founders in FREO2. And it's a long journey. From idea to impact's a long journey. Along the journey, we, by the way, worked on multi-billion-dollar project. I was part of the CERN project that built the large atlas detectors and the control systems at CERN. I never imagined that, so I didn't get to be an astronaut. But I never imagined actually working down there and showing big politicians around. Sometimes I wore a suit, not always a t-shirt. We got to build our own dream come true. We built our own synchrotron in Australia. And then we found the Higgs boson. That's it. It's all finished, and that's the end of my talk, except something happened in my life. And I went along to one of these conferences, and it was called the No Limit Symposium. Well, actually, I didn't go along. To tell the truth, one of my students at the time went along, and then we got dragged along. And there we found out the most amazing fact. Now, you remember, we come from nerd space. Bazinga means something to me. You know, like I almost identify I'm told half of our lab is like Sheldon, and I'm not sure who the other half is like, but anyway, we'll leave it like that. And this is where I found out this amazing fact, and it got our attention. I had no idea. And this is well before COVID. And so we had absolutely no idea that the biggest killer of kids in the world was pneumonia. And that's that 30-second summary there. 1.6 billion people on Earth don't have electricity. Every 30 seconds, by the way, useless fact on, for all of you out there, how many seconds in a year? Nobody knows? Pi by 10 to the 7. Go and check it. Write it down. Pi by 10 to the 7 seconds in a year. That means if your system takes 30 seconds to process something, well, I can do 1 million a year. You'll know that fact. And oxygen, the stuff in the air around us, life-saving medicine, I had no idea it was medicine. Well, it wasn't, but it is now one of the 7 essential medicines. And I thought, I don't know, I thought it was going to be AIDS or malaria that's the biggest killer of kids. Or, you know, whatever. Or, you know, sometimes you ask other people, car accidents. Well, no, most of these kids don't have a car. They're not going to get killed by a car. And we thought, how are we going to do it? Because this is where pneumonia is being affected, all the red bits. And look at big Australia. We don't have any problems. What do we care about? It wasn't an issue for us. I went to Africa. And this is this photograph I took. So this is not, Google photograph of Africa slums. I've walked through this area and I've walked through this. And this is where people are living. And these are the conditions under which people live. Now, remember one of those Marie Curie quotes. I don't know if you remember them. I didn't read them out to you because it's not my job to read the slides. But one of them, it's not necessarily about, I'll paraphrase, it's not about the inventions, it's about the individuals. It's the people, and it's always about the people. So think about the solutions within the context of the people you're serving. And the people we serve, in my case, in respiratory care, they don't have access to equipment. They don't have oxygen. They don't have monitors. They don't have oximeters. They don't have money. And it's expensive. Now, changing tack. Let's go back to NASA. NASA, how much fuel do they use to actually get from here to the moon? Well, I don't know, probably a lot. Well, forget about NASA. Let's think of Boeing. Think of all those airplanes flying. I mean, I'm saying Boeing for you guys, but if we were speaking French, parlez-vous français? Pensez-vous de Airbus or quelque chose comme ça? Think of all those planes and all of those fossil fuels. Well, Bertrand Piccard and Andrew Borchet, Swiss, they thought about that and they decided to build a solar aeroplane to fly around the world. And everyone kept saying to them, what are you going to build a solar airplane for? How many people are you going to carry? And he said, one, me. And they said, but that's not commercially viable. They had a hackathon, probably invented a solar airplane and flew around the world. And he said, well, actually, my motivation is that everyone says right now, you need fossil fuels to fly around the world. Even in a balloon, you need fossil fuels to heat it up. And he said, it's not until somebody proves that you don't need fossil fuels at all and therefore fly around the world that you can change thinking. We were told that you need electricity to produce oxygen, and it's impossible to actually do it without electricity. Except our team, a bunch of weird scientists, STEM people. Actually, I have to admit something, not an engineer, guilty, physics, right? Wanted to be an electrical engineer, but unfortunately didn't make the cut probably, and so ended up a physicist. We had a dream that we could do it using no electricity. It took us a long time. And here's those two younger people. Remember the photo of them sitting in Switzerland? We were playing with a Large Hadron Collider. It's many years later, after 2011, we actually built the world's first oxygen concentrator for a remote health center that uses no electricity.
Pneumonia kills more children globally than any other disease. Reliable oxygen supplies can save countless lives, but that needs a reliable power supply, often lacking where it's most needed. Now, a small team has tapped into a simpler power source, the water flowing in a stream. Their ingenious system compresses air, then filters out the nitrogen to produce life-saving oxygen. They call it FREO2. Low cost, easy to maintain, just add water.
Well, that was it. Apparently, you just go along and you just use water. Well, I can tell you the number of systems that we tried that didn't work was, if we counted the number of hackathons we had to have, it just took a little longer than we expected. And then the program grew and FREO2 became global and we started getting country. And then we realized that the problem was even bigger than the problem we thought. And then there was all these dead machines all over the world. And at Rice University, you've got an amazing team called the NEST group, the NEST 360 Lab, and they're well aware of this and we've worked with them. And it's a much more complex problem. It's not just innovation. Remember, it's impact that you're after, but you're on the start of the journey to have impact. Actually, thanks for sharing the stats, Cole. Only one in four has done a hackathon before. That's fantastic because 3 out of 4 are new to the idea. of contributing to the space of ideas. And we've actually approached this much more holistically, that it's not just about the machines, but it's about the people, and it's about the knowledge transfer. We've been involved in hackathons in country, in Uganda, training or exposing local communities to ideas. We've actually run internships with our students. We've had them out in the field. Remember, juxtapose these photos against the photos you saw of us at CERN, like, with a $2 billion detector. Now we're out in the field and we learned plumbing and we learned the practicalities of making this thing work, and we practice. And there's the version. It's actually, I'm sad to say it for all the 3D printer nuts out there, we couldn't 3D print most of the bits. We actually had to use a drill and a lathe to make half of the bits, right? But of course we could 3D print some crucial little parts. We got to actually come to Washington and display. We got to meet people from WHO. We got to go in a country. We got to actually even pretend to be sick, to sort of see what it was like. Some of us, Bryn can drive a tractor, And by the way, in the meantime, Bryn got older and had a child. Do you get me? And we got to bring the investors along to actually see what we're doing. We got to meet the ambassadors of countries. We got to meet the directors of hospital. It's always a small world. Barged into this guy's office, Celestine Barige. We couldn't get to see him because the secretary said he's too busy, And we said, oh, we're really sorry. We're from Australia. We're just passing through. He comes belting out of his office and he said, welcome. I did my master's in public health at the University of Melbourne. We said, oh, well, surprise, surprise. We're from the University of Melbourne. You never know. Tell people. I was glad to sort of see we got people from Georgia Tech, Ray Bucknell, I don't know, all of those colleges, and Rice and places like that. You never know who you're going to speak to. I even got to drop in on Obama, but he was a little busy. Haven't been back since the other person occupied it. But, we got to at least stand in front of the White House. And we kept playing also. We kept working in our other fields. We fertilized ideas. We didn't abandon our high-end physics. We developed PET scanners. We developed control systems. So the machine on the left to save people, trying to build it for less than $500. The machine on the right, high-speed stabilization systems for electron beam in the Australian synchrotron and also used at CERN. All of that electronics built by the team, by us. You notice David's the same person in the same photo. We got to go and meet colleagues working in Kenya, and that's all part of a journey that comes from actually working in this area. And it's not just us. Here's the photo of our youngest team member, and actually this is a photo of him when he finally joined the group. So apparently at a young age he was interested in visiting satellite control systems. This is a NASA link. We provide NASA some feedback from Tasmania. Look at the equipment. It's old, not a single computer, but it's state-of-the-art electronics. And this is Kevin when he joined as an undergrad. This is him getting older, working with our workshop people. This is him in his spare time trying out for the Olympics. This is him actually giving back to communities and actually winning something. So that's a journey of young, that inquisitive mind all the way through. But then it's not just about teams. We've got Abby in our team. We've got Tessa also in our team. And we go and win one of the top science prizes in Australia on this work. And so what? So what? It's exciting. That's what I'm sharing with you about. It's exciting to work on these problems. And this was our journey. The first hackathon, 2011. It takes a long time to go from innovation to impact, but you don't stop just because it's hard. Because in 2019, we saved our first child with this technology. And this is where we've gone since then. 2,500 kids been treated. And our target for this year is to get up to 4,000. Our target for the next year will be up to 40,000. You can sort of see the exponential rise we're aiming for. And that's been made possible through ideas that get innovated, that get implemented, and then have impact. So it's all about success. So that's it. And you know, the pathway to success is really, really straightforward. You try and then you succeed. So you're going to try some ideas in this hackathon, and I'm not sure it's going to necessarily succeed, because that pathway is quite complex. And so you're going to have to try and fail and try and fail. And I want you to imagine drawing round and round and round. And then, of course, you actually know, hey, there's a centripetal acceleration and there's this force keeping me in this loop. And I just need to accelerate a bit more till I can finally break out of that loop. Terrible physics nerdy joke there. Do you get me? You know, get that angular velocity high enough between trying and failing to succeeding. And remember, fail. I love acronyms. Absolutely love acronyms. FAIL stands for first attempt in learning. So I really look forward to learning more about what you tried that didn't work, because that's part of the journey to sort of solving these problems that you're going to tackle. And don't forget, everyone says, oh, curiosity killed the cat, you know? Well, actually, the clever cat looks carefully at that and says, I'm not a bear. However, if I do go in there, it might be a little bit dangerous. But that curiosity is what's going to get you around that trap and avoid that trap. And the only way to finish is to start. So I reckon it's a good time to start, and I am going to switch back to my wider cam and pass it back to my colleagues. Thank you once again for inviting me to kick this off, you know, and sort of get you started. And I'd be happy to take some questions. And my experience is that it's always the torture. Dr. Reed knows this. If ever you're chairing a conference and you put it out there for questions, you're always panicking that nobody's going to ask a question. And so as the conference organizers, I know Maya, Alex, Cole, and Sophia will have thought about this and might have some questions in case there are questions out there. So thanks very much, everyone. RespiraCon 2 Hackathon is ready to go, ready to launch. You can open your mics up and you're disturbed.
Go ahead if you have any questions in the chat, or if you would like to speak now. Feel free.
Cole, this is the point at which you thank the speaker for coming and you say, tell me, have you got a good question?
Yes. Thank you so much for your talk.
No, I'm joking about that. I'm just throwing the question to you because you're going to get inundated with questions.
I skipped a step. You're right. But yeah.
Yeah, we do actually have a couple of questions for you just to get started. We know that you've done a lot of work internationally. We were wondering, could you tell us a little bit about how you balance, assessing needs and implementing solutions quickly while still respecting the autonomy of the community in which you're working?
So the way to do that, I mean, it's a very good question. How to balance? Probably balance. There's several elements that you might like to look at. There's an element of risk. Well, maybe I don't have the perfect solution. I've only got a partial solution. There's an element of, hang on, I'm an external trying to impose my ideas. This is what I think should help solve. And there's the balance of allowing communities autonomy as well in terms of taking that. I think the key for FREO2 is that we form partnerships. So we actually spent a long time understanding the problem, and part of that meant getting into country and walking beside people as they shared with us the challenges, but more importantly, what they'd already tried and what doesn't work. And I couldn't help but feel that you could solve every problem by ending world poverty and removing corruption. And then magically, infrastructure would appear, science would emerge, farmers would have better yields on crops, world hunger would disappear, and bang, it goes. However, as that takes another 1,000 years, what do you then do? How do you balance that interventionist? And the key is that all of our implementation is actually done by our in-country teams. And now we have to respect, do we just throw our knowledge onto the in-country teams and tell them to do that? No. It's about the knowledge transfer, and it's about involving our in-country teams in that the receipt of that knowledge, and then the implementation, and us actually working to remove the obstacles. And the primary obstacle is lack of resources, not lack of desire to do something, lack of resources. And primarily it's the knowledge, secondary it's the funding, and thirdly it's the empowerment. You get me? So partnership is my answer, and tech transfer. Thanks, Sophia. Did that answer your question, by the way, or did you have a follow-up on that? Or yeah.
I did. I think, yeah, knowing that it's important to work with people in the community and have collaborations and partnerships with people in the communities you're working in. That's so important to helping balance that. So thank you so much for that. I think Alex has a question next.
Yeah. Anyone in the chat, feel free to put your questions if you're not comfortable unmuting. But in the meantime, I can ask my question. I really liked what you said in your talk about how hackathons and even like just being in university is a unique environment where there isn't a lot of external pressure to like, it's okay if you fail and you should embrace failure as a way of learning. I was wondering if you had any advice to our participants as they like transition into their careers of how to continue to embrace failure as an opportunity to learn when there might be more external pressure to get results or deliverables.
There's always external pressure. It's a really great question, and over the years I've had many students and good contacts with the industry. So as a physicist, I'm going to answer your question in a very roundabout way and bring me back to the reality check of when you go to a job, do you get me, and failure in a job, do you get me, and but bring me back to the question, Alex, at the end. I set up this thing called Scilab, you know, the Greek character psi, PSI, Physics Solutions for Industry. And our motto was, we can solve 80% of any problem, right? Notice not 100% of any problem. And I could see all Dr. Reed and probably Dr. Abidi having a heart attack, you know, because the most important thing is to solve 100% of the problem. But we could overcome those obstacles pretty well. Now, often I get some call and then industry would always say, oh, have you got a student you can put on this, da-da-da-da. And I said, yeah, we've got plenty of students, but not a student I can put on this till I better understand what you're going to do with your problem. Because if your problem is a problem where the student can't fail, no, I don't have a student that you can put on this. However, if the project is, listen, we really don't know and we're happy to try anything, and if it doesn't work, it doesn't matter. Well, it sort of matters that you then try something else, but it doesn't matter. There's a safe zone of failing. Industry does have that sometimes. And that's really important to actually understand what are the consequences of failing. You often ask somebody a question and you're hoping to get a yes. Alex, do you know the next best answer to yes?
No.
That's right. That's the answer, by the way. It's a trick question to get you to say no.
No. But
no is a really good answer to a question where if you don't get a yes, a no. To say no, that's a very powerful response. The unequivocal maybe doesn't mean anything, right? So now, going back to the questions in industry, the ability of transitioning from academia to industry is really what sort of job you're going into. So if you're going into a job where you're making a mistake has a completely negative impact on many people downstream, well, then I'd say, no, you're not allowed to make a mistake, because it's up to you to actually have been well positioned to know that if there was a risk of that mistake, that you had mitigated that risk, and therefore a mistake that occurs then is an accident, and then, well, that has to be managed. And so when you go for that job, you have to be realistic. Very few jobs an employer is employing you, hey, come work for us, you know, you can make many mistakes because that's the type of people we are. We heard Roger on YouTube apparently just make mistakes and fail, and we'll grow from that. Most jobs aren't like that, but you can then grow that type of safe culture. You can have a conversation with your superior, your manager, your colleagues, and say, hey, listen, in our spare time, why don't we try this? And it may not work, but if it does work, imagine how we could then do that, and therefore you can go. Cool. All right.
Thank you. I really like what you said about a safe space. I think for this hackathon, it definitely is a safe space. Like, with being very early on in the ideation stage, teams feel free to like take risks, because that's like what we're going to do. Thank you so much.
No worries.
So, thank you so much, Dr. Rassool, for your talk. I think now we're going to move on to the next part of our